Now, wrapping up this section of the show, we're going to talk about one more thing very briefly. Now, this has a couple of connections earlier back in the show. You remember we talked, first of all, about the active aid within the U.S. press for fascist groups and the active slanting of information to, in all cases, put partisan groups, communist groups, leftist coalitions, anyway, anti-fascist groups in the worst possible light. We also talked about the fact that Alger Hiss, the gentleman who was the counsel for the Nye Committee investigating industrial support for fascism in America, made some very bad enemies within the industrial sectors, and that he was eventually put away as a quote-unquote communist spy by the testimony of a man named Whittaker Chambers, who Ronald Reagan just gave the Medal of Freedom to. And thirdly, as Dave reads this last little part, bear in mind what we've just described to you about the situations in such places as Yugoslavia, Greece, North Africa, etc., as regards the treatment of partisan governments by the invading Allies.
The following letter was written to the New York Times on Sunday, March 11th, 1984. The writer, by the way, is Ms. Dorothy Sterling, S-T-E-R-L-I-N-G, and the caption here, the notation underneath her signature, is as follows. The writer, a Time Incorporated employee from 1936 to 1949, was Assistant Bureau Chief in Life's News Bureau from 1944 to 1949. And Dorothy Sterling writes as follows. Whittaker Chambers, odd choice for the Medal of Freedom. To the editor, many of my former colleagues at Time Incorporated will share my feeling of consternation at the news that the Medal of Freedom is to be awarded to Whittaker Chambers posthumously. We still remember his reign as Time's foreign news editor, which began in the hopeful summer of 1944 when Allied armies were marching across Europe. Time's foreign correspondents, men like Charles Wertenbaker, John Hersey, Richard Lauterbach, Stoyan Pribicevic, and Percy Nauth, K-N-A-U-T-H, reported the emergence of popular governments backed by partisans who had been fighting Hitler. The readers of Time never saw these dispatches. Whittaker Chambers suppressed them, rewrote them, distorted them, tailoring the news to make it conform to his own right-wing view of world affairs. From Paris, Charles Wertenbaker protested Time's story of Red Riots, unquote, which had been substituted for his cable describing France's orderly new local governments. Probijevic's reports from Yugoslavia telling of the slaughter of partisans by Draza Mihailovic never saw print. So many of John Hersey's stories from Moscow were suppressed that he stopped sending political news and confined his cables to accounts of Shostakovich's newest symphony and other cultural events. Reporting from China, Theodore H. White saw his criticisms of Chiang Kai-shek's autocratic regime replaced with encomiums of Chiang as a defender of democratic principles. When researchers in Time's New York office protested the inaccuracy of the foreign news reports, Chambers habitually replied, quote, "Truth doesn't matter," unquote. The facts had to be altered to fit his anti-communist crusade.